Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Peter Terry of the Firm Foundation Academy, welcoming you to the 12th session, correct? 12th session? Yes. Of The Extraordinary Life of Abdul-Bahá, presented by Violetta Zane and hosted by the Clearwater Baha'ís. We also want to acknowledge the Desert Rose Baha'i Institute for being part of this project. And we're coming to the last few presentations by Violetta on this subject, and we've been looking forward to this. And so I'm going to let her go and take over. Violetta, the screen is yours.
Oh, thank you, Peter, for this really nice introduction. Thank you to everyone at Clearwater Firm Foundation and Desert Rose Baha'i Institute for this. We are slowly approaching the end of our chronology on the life of Abdul-Bahá, but we were speaking a little bit before this session began, and the life of Abdul-Bahá increases in intensity as he approaches the hour of his ascension. It does not slow down. And so today we have a really wonderful series of stories about the last 3 years of Abdul-Bahá. But yesterday, what we did was we looked at Abdul-Bahā's return to the Holy Land and his few months of being in the Holy Land with the Baha'is and with the authorities and with the people of Akka, who he missed so much during his 3-year journeys to the West, and also the shrine of Baha'u'llah and returning to the shrine of his Holy Father. And then we looked at Abdul-Bahá during the First World War and how he served everyone around unceasingly for 4 years. And then after the war, the liberation of Haifa and the unveiling of the tablets of the divine plan, this charter for the proclamation of the faith of Baha'u'llah worldwide in every country, every city in the world, on all 5 continents. And today, we're going to begin with a really interesting vignette. And that is sometime in 1918, Abdul-Bahá meets a future president of Israel. Now, pictured here, you have Yitzhak Ben Zvi, the man on the right, the future president of the state of Israel, and his wife, Rachel Yanait, in 1913, 6 years before they meet Abdul-Bahá in Bahji. Sometime in around 1919, Abdul-Bahá meets the future second president of the state of Israel. At the time in Bahji, Abdul-Bahá encounters a poor young Jewish couple, Yitzhak Ben Zvi and his wife Rachel. They are walking through Palestine, and passing in front of Bahji, they meet the master, who, warm and courteous, takes them into the shrine of Baha'u'llah. The couple are very impressed with Abdul-Bahá and later recount this story to Hand of the Cause and Secretary of the Guardian, Leroy Iowas. 33 years later, on April 26, 1954, President Yitzhak Ben Zvi and his wife, Rachel Yanait, visit the shrine of the Bab at the invitation of Shoghi Effendi, then the guardian of the Baha'i faith. This visit would mark the first time in the history of the cause that the head of an independent nation had ever made an official visit of this kind, and it would constitute another milestone in the development of the world center of the faith and the prestige of the faith. November 1919 in Haifa, 10 Haparsim, the Western Pilgrim House. This is the Western Pilgrim House at 10 Haparsim, in construction around 1922, a year after the ascension of Abdul-Bahá. At the end of World War I, large numbers of pilgrims start coming to the Holy Land. This is the first time that the many who became Baha'is and met Abdul-Bahá during his journeys to the West or in the years following can come and visit the Master on pilgrimage. The small stone dwelling right across from Abdul-Bahá's house at 7 Persian Street is no longer sufficient, but there's already an adequate Eastern Pilgrim House recently completed. A Persian believer donates a plot of land across from the home of the Master, a plot of land where Baha'u'llah used to pitch his own tent. and William Henry Randall asks for the privilege of contributing money for the building of a Western pilgrim house in November 1919. Abdul Baha approves the final design, but construction will begin in earnest a year later. And now something wonderful, the story of the tablets of the Hague, beginning 11th February 1916. This is a photograph of the participants of the World Congress for Peace, held in 1913 in The Hague, one of many peace-related gatherings held in the Dutch capital city. Between 1899 and 1913, this is the introduction to how these tablets of The Hague came to be. In 1899, at the initiative of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, who had received a tablet from Baha'u'llah, 26 delegates from European countries, as well as the United States, Mexico, China, Japan, and Siam, now Thailand, meet in The Hague in the Netherlands for the first international government-level World Peace Conference. 8 years later, in 1907, a second conference takes place with delegates from 45 countries, and the foundation stone is laid for the future seat of the International Court of Arbitration, funded by American steel magnate and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie. The court is inaugurated in 1913, and a third International Peace Conference is scheduled for 1916. In 1915, the Central Organization for a Durable Peace announces it is looking for peace specialists, not politicians, to represent their country at the third peace conference. And the Central Organization for a Durable Peace publishes its constitution in newspapers all over the world. In Persia, a man named Ahmad Yazdani comes across this new organization, and in consultation with Hand of the Cause, Ali Muhammad ibn Azdak writes a letter to the Central Organization for a Durable Peace regarding the Baha'i principles and suggesting they seek guidance from Abdul-Bahá about the establishment of universal peace. Regarding their aim, their stated aim in their constitution, peace was a foundational subject of Abdul-Bahā's talks during his journeys in the West, and 140 selected talks during his journey to America in 1912 were collected under the apt title, The Promulgation of Universal Peace. On February 11th, 1916, after corresponding with Ahmad Yazdani and his friends, the Central Organization for a Durable Peace sends a letter to Tehran to be handed to Abdul Baha. But because of this First World War, the letter does not reach Abdul Baha until 3 years later in December 1919, when it is finally handed to the master. The 17th of December 1919, Tablets to the Hague, Part 2, Abdul Baha reveals the first tablet to the Hague. This is a photograph of Abdul Baha in the Holy Land, reading a letter. 17th of December, 1919. As soon as Abdul Baha receives a letter from the Central Organization for a Durable Peace, he dictates a weighty and extremely long Persian tablet in response, known as the Lahi Lahi, or the Tablet of the Hague. In God Passes By, Shoghi Effendi refers to the Tablet of the Hague as a tablet of far-reaching importance. It is, in fact, the tablet addressed to the most prominent international institution in Abdul Baha's ministry. And rather than entrusting it to mail, Abdul Baha has it delivered in person by hand-picked Baha'is he has summoned from Persia. The first tablet, of substantial length at nearly 6,000 words, includes Abdul Baha's analysis of the attainment of international peace within the context of the need for wider political, economic, and cultural change. Abdul Baha, in this important tablet, also identifies the most important Baha'i principles, such as the abolition of all forms of prejudice, the harmony of science and religion, the equality of men and women, and that religion must be the cause of love, among several other topics. Between the 5th of November, 1919, and the 23rd of January, 1920, Baha'u'llah and the New Era, the story of Dr. John Eslamont and Abdul Baha. This is a collage of 4 images. In the top left, you have the frontispiece of the very first edition of Baha'u'llah and the New Era in 1923. On the top right is Dr. John Eslamont and a young Shoghi Effendi in Haifa, sometime in 1919, 1920. On the bottom left is a portrait of Dr. John Eslamont, and on the right is the cover of the first edition of Baha'u'llah and the New Era. Dr. Eslamont is born in Scotland, and from an early age becomes interested in a wide variety of subjects and religious beliefs until he encounters the Baha'i faith. He is well-read and well-educated man who speaks fluent French, German, Spanish, and Esperanto. And he begins learning Arabic and Persian very soon after he becomes a Baha'i in March 1915 in order to access the holy writings in their original languages. By October 1916, John Eslamont has already started working on Baha'u'llah and the New Era and begun a correspondence with Shoghi Effendi, which the future guardian hopes would be continuous, inspiring, and regular. In early January 1919, Dr. Eslamont receives from Shoghi Effendi a tablet revealed in his honor by Abdul Baha, in which the master hopes Eslamont will become a torch so that light and knowledge might shine out from him, and adds, "Concerning the book you are editing, send me a copy thereof." Dr. Eslamont immediately forwards Abdul Baha the first 9 chapters of Baha'u'llah and the New Era, and mentions he has committed Abdul Baha's tablet to him to memory. It seems Dr. Eslamont had wanted to travel to the Holy Land in July 1919, but did not, because Abdul Baha had asked him to bring the whole book with him when he came, and he still had several months before finishing it. When Baha'u'llah and the New Era is nearly finished, Dr. Eslamont at long last arrives in Haifa with a group of pilgrims, which include Corinne and Edna True, on the 5th of November, 1919. On their way to Haifa, Corinne had recognized John Eslamont at a distance, and when she says his name to her sister, Edna immediately refers to him as the Scot who's writing a book about the faith. During his pilgrimage, Dr. Eslamont is often ill with dysentery, staying in bed a number of days. And Abdul Baha says he will pray for him and pray for his spiritual health. He said, "I suffered very much when I came here, the prison in Akka, where he had very terrible dysentery. You must have a portion. You must suffer a little too." Then Abdul Baha gives Eslamont diet advice and sends him a rug from his own bed. Throughout his nearly 3-month stay in Haifa, most of Dr. Eslamont's time is spent with Abdul Baha, discussing Baha'u'llah and the New Era, and Abdul Baha makes many suggestions for the manuscript, including encouraging Dr. Eslamont to shorten it considerably. During his pilgrimage, Dr. Eslamont also develops a close friendship with Shoghi Effendi and takes assiduous notes for his book, questioning dozens of illustrious early Baha'is, gathering information and accumulating material. On the 5th of December, 1919, Dr. Eslamont and Abdul Baha take a drive through the rain, and Abdul Baha teaches him a few words of Persian, and Dr. Eslamont teaches Abdul Baha a few words of Esperanto. A few days later, Abdul Baha, Shoghi Effendi, Dr. Eslamont, and Lutfullah Hakim visit Akka, the Garden of Rizwan, and the Shrine of Baha'u'llah. Because Dr. Eslamont is often sick during his months in the Holy Land, he devises this really interesting stratagem in order not to delay removing his shoes when entering the presence of Abdul Baha. He just flattens the back of his shoes so they become like slip-ons and he could just slip them off. Abdul Baha had asked Dr. Zia Baghdadi to translate Baha'u'llah and the New Era into Persian. And around December 1919, January 1920, while Dr. Baghdadi is reading parts of his translation aloud to him, Abdul Baha makes corrections as he reads and says, "There is so much work and little time. However, this book must be translated, as I do not wish Dr. Eslamant to live this place unhappy. Baha'u'llah and the New Era will be published in September 1923, and the impact of the book at the time of its publication would be nothing short of monumental, spreading accurate information, most of it having been reviewed and approved by Abdul Baha himself about the Baha'i faith worldwide. Shoghi Effendi would call Baha'u'llah and the New Era the textbook of the Baha'i faith, and would actively promote its translation and publication in many languages. Perhaps more importantly for us, a century later, is Shoghi Effendi's qualification of the pure intention of its author, whom Shoghi Effendi raised posthumously to the rank of Hand of the Cause. 1919-1920 in Haifa, Abdul Baha's relationship with the city of Haifa. On the left is a photograph of Sir Patrick Geddes, and on the right, his Geddes plan for Tel Aviv. Sir Patrick Geddes was a pioneering urban planner in Palestine. Sir Patrick Geddes, who gave Abdul Baha a tour of the Outlook Tower in Edinburgh, if you remember, in January 1913, has been doing urban planning around Palestine for about 2 years in Jerusalem and Haifa. Patrick Geddes is a fascinating figure. He's a biologist, a socialist, a philosopher, a geographer, a philanthropist, and a pioneering urban planner, well known for his innovative thinking in city planning. In 1919-1920, Sir Patrick Geddes meets with Abdul Baha on more than one occasion. One memorable day, Geddes calls on the master to convey a request from a new civic society called Pro Carmel, whose purpose is to advance all the common interests of the city without distinction of race, party, or creed. From what can be gathered of Sir Patrick Geddes' description, the Pro Carmel Society seems to be a social and economic development initiative for the betterment of the lives of the people of Haifa. And it unites Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Baha'is who offer service together for the social and economic betterment of the city, with activities touching on morals and education, public health and art. And the Pro Carmel Society would like Abdul Baha to be its new president. Abdul Baha agrees to take on this leadership role, and Geddes hastens to add that everyone was entirely satisfied with this outcome because all of Haifa looks up to Abdul Baha, who is, quote, the foremost of their fellow citizens. This is why this section is titled The Years of Prestige. In the same meeting, Abdul Baha approves an urban planning proposal put to him by Sir Patrick Geddes and the Haifa city engineer, Dr. Criffin, which centers around the master's fairly extensive properties on Mount Carmel. 2 public roads need access in order to cut through Abdul Baha's properties. Abdul Baha not only grants the land for the roads that cut through his properties, he refuses to accept any payment for it and donates 4,000 square meters of land for a public school needed in that neighborhood. 1920, King Faisal meets Abdul Baha. This is King Faisal of Iraq. At some point during 1920, Abdul Baha is visited by King Faisal, or as his full royal name states, Faisal ibn al-Hussein bin Ali al-Hashemi, king of the Arab kingdom of Syria or Greater Syria. Martha Root interviews King Faisal on January 2nd, 1930 in his secretariat in Baghdad on the banks of the Tigris River, not far from where Baha'u'llah proclaimed his mission in 1863. After passing along Shoghi Effendi's greetings, Martha Root's first question to King Faisal is, what was your impression of Abdul Baha, center of the covenant, of the Baha'i movement. King Faisal replies thoughtfully, Auguste Effendi, for that was the name I always used in speaking with Abdul Baha, impressed me as a very great, intelligent, wise man. I had great respect for him because he was working for the welfare of all humanity. I met him just 10 years ago in 1920 in Haifa, Palestine. January 1920, the story of Abdul Baha's car. This is a photograph of Abdul Baha's Cunningham automobile, the 7-passenger touring car gifted to Abdul Baha by Ella Goodall, with Saichiro Fujita behind the wheel. In January 1920, along with an arrival of new pilgrims, is another arrival of an entirely new sort, the arrival of Abdul Baha's hand-built 7-seater Cunningham automobile. Cunningham automobiles are one of the earliest vehicles in the advent of the automotive age. And the master's Cunningham automobile is a gift from Ella Goodall Cooper. Saichiro Fujita, who has been invited by Abdul Baha to come and live in the Holy Land, accompanies the automobile from the United States to Haifa, where he stays on as one of the drivers and mechanics. When the automobile arrives in Haifa, Abdul Baha instructs Shoghi Effendi to have it clear customs and delivered to his home. Although the automobile arrives on a weekend, Shoghi Effendi succeeds in getting it delivered by taking the papers to the homes of various city officials and asking them to sign on the documents and give the necessary orders to release the car into Abdul Baha's possession. This is yet another example of Abdul Baha closely mentoring Shoghi Effendi in skills that he will use again and again in his guardianship. Abdul Baha would eventually ride in the Cunningham automobile on occasions, but it would predominantly be used to transport pilgrims. The automobile was too wide for Haifa's narrow streets and therefore was confined to one-way streets. It was also too wide to drive through Akka's city gate. At times, Abdul Baha would join the pilgrims in the automobile for a drive up Mount Carmel to look at the view of the Mediterranean. In her biography of the life and work of Shoghi Effendi, The Priceless Pearl, Ruhiya Hanum makes a stunning point. This was typical of the way Shoghi Effendi did his work throughout his entire life, speaking of how Shoghi Effendi cleared customs on a weekend. He always wanted everything done at once, if not sooner, and everything he had any personal control over progressed at that speed. January 17th, 1920, Haifa. Abdul Baha asks Agnes Parsons to work for race relations. This is a photograph of eminent Baha'i Agnes Parsons, who will later be named a hand of the cause. Agnes Parsons and Abdul Baha have a very special relationship. Agnes had invited Abdul Baha to stay at her home in Washington, D.C. in April 1912 and hosted the master for 3 of his most pleasant weeks in North America at her summer home in Dublin, New Hampshire in August 1912. Now, 8 years later, Agnes Parsons comes to the Holy Land on pilgrimage between December 25th, 1920 and mid-February 1921. At dinner halfway through her pilgrimage on January 17th, 1921, Abdul Baha speaks to Agnes about the racial tensions in America, which he witnessed firsthand during his visit to Washington, D.C. Abdul Baha directly asks Agnes why she does not have meetings in Washington with both white and black people. Agnes responds, "If the colored people come here, the white ones will not come. We had appointed a special place for the colored people, but they do not go there." Abdul Baha explains that black people feel slighted by this arrangement and tells Agnes to organize a racial amity campaign for the Baha'i community to overcome the problems of racial inequality, saying, "I want you to arrange a convention for unity of the colored and white races. Upon her return to the United States, Agnes Parsons, always obedient to Abdul-Bahá, throws herself into the task and works closely with Louis Gregory, who will later be named a hand of the cause. One second. I'm not sure. Can anyone tell me if Agnes Parsons was a hand of the cause? I may have misspoke. Anyway, we'll address that in the questions and answers. I think I may have misspoke. In around 1920, Abdul-Bahá meets two high-ranking British officials, Sir Herbert Louis Samuel, first Viscount Samuel, the British High Commissioner for Palestine, and Charles Robert Ashby, civic advisor to the city of Jerusalem. Shortly after being appointed British High Commissioner for Palestine, Sir Herbert Samuel pays Abdul-Bahá a visit. He has previously met Abdul-Bahá and has a long-standing interest in the Baha'i faith. But with this visit, his intention is also to demonstrate the British commitment to tolerance and respect for all religions. The master, during his visit, explains the fundamental teachings of the Baha'i faith and listens to Sir Herbert's comments and answers all his questions. In his memoirs, 16 years later, Sir Herbert Samuel will say of Abdul-Bahá, "I was impressed, as was every visitor, by Abdul-Bahá's dignity, grace, and charm. Of moderate stature, his strong features and lofty expression lent to his personality an appearance of majesty." Charles Robert Ashby, a civic advisor to the city of Jerusalem, came across Abdul-Bahá during a visit to Haifa in the company of his wife, Janet. He recorded memories of the wonderful tour he spent with Abdul-Bahá in a Palestine notebook, where he has a sentence that sums up the impact the master could have on people in just a short meeting. "I have rarely come across a man who so completely sums up the saint, or let us say, saint and philosopher combined. For the presence and image of the man are from the Middle Ages, their spirit of personal holiness, while what he says has the lucidity of the Greek. It is disruptive of all religions and medieval systems. It is philosophic, modern, and synthetic." A long section of this description is available in Earl Redmond's wonderful book, Visiting Abdul-Bahá, Volume 2, The Final Years, 1913-1921, on pages 137 to 140. And now, the story of Abdul-Bahá's knighthood. April 27th, 1920, Abdul-Bahá's knighthood. This is a Roman underground storage stone pit, called a horium, often used for grains. Those used by Abdul-Bahá may not have looked exactly like this, but they were, in essence, the same stone underground pit where you store grains so that they won't be destroyed by the elements or by pests like locusts. After the British arrive in Haifa, their situation in November 1918 is not what they had expected. Although the blockade had endangered the population, one man alone had essentially averted a famine in the Haifa-Akka area. Abdul-Bahá had perhaps been preparing for the war since 1901, when he first bought those thousands of acres of farmland in Adasiyyih. But from 1912 onwards, the master made more and more definite plans to increase production in all his farmlands, especially after he returned to the Holy Land in person in 1913. During the entirety of the war, starting even before the locust plague of 1915, Abdul-Bahá had carefully grown absolutely prolific quantities of wheat and corn in several locations in the Jordan and Yarmouk valleys. brought up all the cereals that could be brought up in the neighboring villages, and single-handedly developed a complex logistical system of expediting the provisions, including 200 camel caravans, storing them in Roman-era underground pits. Once the corn and wheat were in the Haifa Akka area, Abdul Baha personally managed them with extraordinary efficiency, distributing the precious rations in an orderly, equitable way to all people living in the area, regardless of nationality and religion, preventing the starvation of thousands. And when Haifa had been liberated, the British Army was hungry, having outrun their supply train. Abdul Baha also fed them with corn he had saved in his underground granaries. The US Bureau of Census for Religious Bodies, 1936, documents this episode in the life of Abdul Baha officially in their report in the following way. During the World War, communication with friends and believers outside was most completely cut off, and Abdul Baha and his followers suffered hardships. During those dreary years, the resourcefulness and sagacious, wise philosophy of Abdul Baha were strikingly shown. He personally organized extensive agricultural operations near Tiberias, bringing under cultivation land that had been untilled for centuries. Thus, he secured a great supply of wheat, by of which famine was averted not only for the Bahá'ís, but for many of all the religions whose wants he liberally supplied. If you want to read this in the original paper, you can click on the link in the chronology. After the end of World War I, a group of pilgrims, which includes a Persian Baha'i named Avron, leaves from Tehran. The journey to Istanbul takes them 3 months by trains, boats, and carriages. When they arrive in Istanbul, the Baha'is entrust Avron with silver to bring as a gift to Abdul Baha. When the group passes through Akka, they are set upon by thieves who tear their luggage open and steal their belongings. As they take the silver, Avron says, "That silver is for Abdul Baha." The thieves grow quiet and tell Avron, "Abdul Baha fed us. He clothed us. He housed us. Here is your silver for Abdul Baha." Before the knighthood, on July 18, 1919, General Sir Arthur Money sends General Allenby an official recommendation that Abdul Baha be given the Order of the British Empire with the grade of Knight Commander. The most excellent order of the British Empire is a British order of chivalry, rewarding contributions to the arts and sciences, work with charitable and welfare organizations, and public service outside the civil service. The reason stated for the award of knighthood to be given to Abdul Baha is officially stated as follows. Abdul Baha has given consistently loyal service to the British cause since the occupation. His advice has been most valuable to the military governor and officers of the administration in Haifa, where all his influence has been for good. He was for many years placed in captivity by the Turks in the citadel at Akka. The recommendation is then received at the British Foreign Office and passed along with a supplementary note from a gentleman named E.W. Light. Perhaps this paper might now be sent on to Sir Frederick Ponsonby with a view to obtaining His Majesty's sanction for the award of a Knight of the British Empire to the head of the Baha'i religion, Abdul Baha. I suppose we may take it that Sir Arthur Money, in recommending Abdul Baha for the knighthood, does not think that any injury will be done to that gentleman's religious susceptibilities by giving him a cruciform, cross-shaped decoration. But perhaps the War Department would advise on the point, which seems one of the special importance in this special case. Abdul Baha's knighthood will be approved by King George V on the 7th of November, 1919. The story of the carriage. This is Abdul Baha being driven in his carriage to his investiture as Knight of the British Empire by his faithful driver Isfandiar. This is a courtesy of the National Baha'i Archives of the United States. Shortly before the presentation of the knighthood on April 27th, 1920, the British government sends a large automobile to pick up Abdul Baha from his home and bring him to the governor's house, where the ceremony is being held. Isfandiar, for many years, Abdul Baha's faithful carriage driver, seeing the elegant car, feels sad and unneeded. No doubt Isfandiar had hoped to have the honor to be the one to bring Abdul Baha to this great event. Meanwhile, the chauffeur of the fancy automobile is looking everywhere for Abdul Baha. The master cannot be found. People rush in every direction to find him. Suddenly, Abdul Baha appears alone, walking his very distinctive kingly walk, and his eternal aura of both absolute simplicity and utter greatness. Abdul Baha turns to Isfandiar and gives him a sign. Isfandiar dashes off, harnesses the horses, brings them to the lower gate of 7 Persian Street. When they arrive at the governor's house, Isfandiar drops Abdul Baha off at a side entrance of the garden. Even for what others might consider the greatest honor of Abdul Baha's life, which he would not agree that that was it, he still remembers the feelings of his faithful, longtime carriage driver. The knighthood. The knighthood ceremony takes place at the home of the British governor, Colonel Stanton, in his beautiful garden. Also present to honor Abdul Baha are British officials, Muslim and Christian religious leaders, notables, and officials. British troops line the alley of the garden, ready to make the guard of honor and military band plays, while everyone waits for Abdul Baha, the guest of honor, to arrive in that very elegant car and pass through the front gate by the guard of honor. To everyone's surprise, Abdul Baha enters quietly from the back gate and takes his seat. No fuss, no muss. Standing behind the Master General Allenby gives a short speech, followed by a few words by Abdul Baha, who then offers a prayer for the British government. Once the ceremony is over, Abdul Baha leaves as discreetly as he had arrived. Abdul Baha had at first refused the knighthood, then accepted it as a gift on the part of a just king, as he said it. The master would never formally use the title of Sir Abdul Baha Abbas, and the knighthood changed nothing for his reality. Mr. Ashby recorded that Abdul Baha even said about the knighthood that, as a teacher of God's word, it will make no difference to me. Perhaps the most significant elements of Abdul Baha's knighthood are his utter humility at that moment, the outward seeing, most prestigious moment of his life, receiving an honor from a king, his caring for the feelings of Isfandiar, using his own carriage instead of a fancy, luxurious car, entering through the back gate instead of the guard of honor, refusing to bow to pomp and circumstance, keeping his exits and his entry as humble, discreet, and simple as possible, and praying for the very government that gave him the honor. In true Abdul Baha fashion. 1920, Adasiyyih, Abdul Baha's 4th and last visit to Adasiyyih. There are no current or past photographs of the fields and landscapes around Adasiyyih proper, but this is a photograph of fields and valleys in Hamat Gader. Is very close. This photograph was taken less than 5 kilometers away from the lands of Adasiyyih. Sometime in 1920, Abdul-Bahá pays his fourth and last visit to Adasiyyih since his return from his travels to the West in 1913, and he stays one day and one night. Before he arrives, Bedouins, nomadic Arab tribes, have invaded the village, but the Baha'is have not been harmed, even though the Bedouins outnumber them. Soon after his arrival, Abdul-Bahá informs the Baha'i farmers that the purpose of his visit is to put in place a permanent arrangement with them. Until 1920, the Baha'i farmers in Adasiyyih have been paying 1/3 of their farm produce to the Holy House, Abdul Baha, center of the covenant, mainly because of his wartime needs and responsibilities. With peace returned, Abdul Baha desired to revisit the ratio to a fairer distribution of the profits for the Adasiyyih farmers and proposes a system where the farmers will only pay him 1/5 of the profits after paying their 10% tax to the government and 10% tax to the partners. Instead of 1/3, 1/5. Abdul Baha gave more wise and economic advice during this visit. He recommended the farmers pay their laborers a percentage of their net income instead of a system of shares to have them engaged. During the course of this short visit, Abdul Baha also emphasizes to the Baha'is the importance of daily devotional gatherings and practicing consultation to resolve disputes. The local spiritual assembly of Adasiyyih would be formed 4 years later. And now, possibly one of my favorite stories in Abdul Baha's life, the story of Abdul Baha's bananas. This photograph is a banana plantation in Palestine in the 1930s. From Palestine Remembered, used with permission. In the last years of his life, Abdul Baha introduced bananas to Palestine. There had never been any bananas before. When Abdul Baha is given 7 banana suckers, the proper name for banana shoots, from India, he gives them to the Baha'i farmers in Adasiyyih and asks them to plant the suckers and take good care of them. Despite never having either grown or cultivated bananas, Abdul Baha's very specific advice for the plantation guides the farmers, and the experiment is a great success. It is believed, according to Dr. Iraj Pucci, specialist in this matter, that the Baha'i farmers in Adasiyyih were the first farmers to grow bananas in both Jordan and Palestine, and that until Abdul Baha had introduced bananas to the region, no one in Syria, Palestine, or Jordan knew anything about bananas, let alone how to grow the crop. Apparently, the villages in the Adasiyyih area found bananas quite unappealing at first. That is, until they were told they had to peel the outer skin before eating them. And that only the inside soft flesh was edible. Within a few years, everyone was growing bananas and profiting greatly from the lucrative crop due to the high demand. And now, May to June 1920, the Tablets of the Hague, Part 3, the Delivery. So these two very wonderful gentlemen are the trusted couriers of the Tablets to the Hague. Mr. Ahmad Yazdani, who you will recall was the first one who had contacted the Central Organization for Endurable Peace from Iran, and Ali Muhammad ibn Azdak, apostle of Baha'u'llah and hand of the cause. Early May 1920, Ahmad Yazdani and Ali Muhammad ibn Azdak arrive from Persia and have a brief stay in the Holy Land, during which Abdul Baha gives them instructions, including relying on divine assistance and turning their thoughts to the Abha kingdom if they are asked to speak. The two men begin their journey from the Holy Land to the Netherlands in early May 1920. For the step-by-step and highly detailed account of their adventures in travel, including an interactive map, please refer to the website called The Journey of Abdul Baha's Tablet to the Hague. It is a wonderful, very well-designed website, specially dedicated to this subject. Ahmad Yazdani and Ali Muhammad ibn Azdak finally arrive in the Hague and stay at a hotel during the Pentecost holiday, arriving on the 22nd of May, 1920. 5 days later, on the 27th of May, 1920, after the holiday of the Pentecost, Ahmad Yazdani and Ibn Azdak are able to deliver Abdul-Bahā's tablet to The Hague, to the Secretariat Office of the Executive Committee of the Central Organization for a Durable Peace. Ahmad Yazdani and Ali Muhammad Ibn Azdak are disappointed when they learn the Central Organization has effectively been dissolved since the establishment of the League of Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. The Executive Committee delivers its answers asking for further details on what Baha'is plan to do about world peace between the 12th and the 13th of June. And Ahmad Yazdani forwards the request for further details to Abdul Baha in the Holy Land. Between the 27th of May and August 1920, Ahmad Yazdani, a fluent Esperanto speaker, uses the next 5 weeks they have in the Netherlands to proclaim the faith in a country where there is, at the time, only 2 resident Baha'is, George and Anna Enslin of Blaricum. Yazdani gives talks on various public and private meetings in 6 Dutch cities, and several newspapers articles are printed about the Baha'i faith during this time. July, August 1920, the Tablets of the Hague, Part 4, the second tablet to the Hague. This is a photograph of Abdul Baha writing on a piece of paper while standing in the Holy Land around 1920. When Abdul Baha receives Ahmad Yazdani's June 13th, 1920 cover letter enclosing the response from the Executive Committee of the Central Organization for a Durable Peace, the master immediately responds, revealing the second tablet to the Hague. This one is linked to in the chronology if you would like to read the second one. First one is also linked to in the appropriate vignette. In this second tablet to the Hague, nearly 1/10 the length of the first tablet to the Hague, Abdul Baha returns to the idea of the importance of religious faith to the establishment of peace, explaining, quote, his desire for peace is not derived merely from the intellect. It is a matter of religious belief and one of the eternal foundations of the faith of God. In this tablet, Abdul Baha also acknowledges that even if the, quote, benefits of universal peace are not recognized among the people, and likewise the harmful effects of war are clear and manifest to all. Peace cannot be attained with knowledge alone, but a power of implementation is needed to establish it throughout the world. This power of implementation, Abdul Baha suggests, is the awakening of conscience so that souls may feel compelled to evince a goodly character. On 17th July 1920, Abdul Baha writes to Ahmad Yazdani and tells him not to be disappointed about the disappointing meeting with the Hague. He has planted the seed and he must now put his trust in God. On the 1st of August 1920, the first tablet to the Hague is published in Star of the West. Between the 2nd and the 6th of August 1920, Ahmad Yazdani and Ali Muhammad Ibn Azdak receive Abdul Baha's second letter to the Hague in answer to the letter from the Executive Committee, and they hand deliver it to the Secretary's office. This is their last contact with the Central Organization for a Durable Peace. And on the 19th of January, 1921, shortly after the Master's Ascension, the second tablet is published in Star of the West. For more information on the 2 tablets to the Hague, 2 of Abdul Baha's most weighty and most important tablets, please read them and read the beautiful photo chronology created by the National Spiritual Assembly of the Bahá'ís of the Netherlands, entitled The Journey of Abdul Baha's Tablets to the Hague. And you can click on the image below in the chronology to arrive at the website. On the 16th of January, let me just correct myself here. The second tablet to the Hague is published in Star of the West 9 months before Abdul Baha's Ascension. I miscalculated in my head. On the 16th of January, 1921, Adasiyyih, Abdul Baha's prayer for the farmers in Adasiyyih. Now, this prayer mentions something called the ghor, or al-ghar in Arabic. And when I was trying to illustrate it, I did not think it would be possible to do it. And in fact, this is a perfect illustration of the prayer, because this area that we see in this aerial photograph is actually exactly the area that Abdul Baha mentions in the prayer when he says, they have entered Ghar. Ghar is this very valley. It is at the confluence of the Jordan and the Yarmouk rivers. So we've recently come across a Persian prayer of Abdul Baha for the Bahá'ís of Adasiyyih. And what I'm going to read to you is not an authoritative translation, it's a provisional translation by Adib Masumian. And while it is not authorized, it was produced under the auspices of the World Center, because they did review this provisional translation and approve it for inclusion in this chronology. It was revealed on the 16th of January, 1921 for the Baha'i Friends in Adasiyyih. It is a beautiful and moving prayer that now concludes all of the various Jordan Valley and Adasiyyih chapters in this entire chronology, beginning with part 4 and continuing on in part 8. And this is how we're going to end this beautiful story of Adasiyyih and all the Baha'i farming villages that began 20 years previously in 1901. Adasiyyih, to be recited by the Friends. He is the all-glorious. O thou kind Lord, thou who art independent of all things, these servants of thine traversed mountains and deserts and crossed plains and seas till they reached their desired destinations, and now they have entered Ghar. No haven of refuge do we have but thee. None other do we wish to render us aid and answer our cries. Admit us into the shelter of thy support and protect us from faltering and wavering. O divine providence, the tests are intense, the trials without end. Unite us, make us one, that we may take one another in our embrace, that we may follow thy path, commune with thee, and seek thy good pleasure. Abdul Baha Abbas, 6 Jamadiul Ullah, 1339 AH, 16 January 1921, Haifa. Between the 3rd of March and April 1921 in Tiberias, Abdul Baha's last visit to his cherished, beloved Galilee. On the 3rd of March 1921, Abdul Baha leaves Haifa for Tiberias in order to make arrangements for the protection of the Baha'i farmers in the area. Farmers have been attacked by bandits who steal their crops and terrorize the population. We have no details on this aspect of Abdul Baha's trip to Tiberias, but the visit is very special for a different reason. Among probably a much larger number of pilgrims he receives while Abdul Baha stays in Tiberias during this last visit, 2 encounters are deeply significant, each in their own way, given that Abdul Baha's passing is only a short 8 months away. All of these are from Earl Redman's masterful book, Visiting Abdul Baha Volume 2, The Final Years, 1913-1921. And these are highly summarized versions of Earl Redman's. So please pick up the book and read the original versions. Abdul Baha travels to Tiberias with a pilgrim couple, Mountford and Edel Mills. When he arrives, he rents a room on the top floor of the Tiberias Hotel overlooking the Sea of Galilee. Speaking of the spirituality of their surroundings, Abdul Baha points to the lake and tells his companions about Jesus Christ, pointing to a church near the shore. This is a view from the Tiberias Hotel, the exact hotel that Abdul Baha stayed in during his last visit to Tiberias. So Abdul Baha points to the Galilee and tells his friends, it was just there that His Holiness met Peter and others and asked what they were doing. They answered, fishing. And Jesus replied, throw away your nets and follow me. I will make you fishers of men. A few days later, Mason and Will Remy arrive in Tiberias, and Mason Remy, at long last, has his private interview with Abdul Baha. Interestingly, given Mason Remy's future violation of the covenant, Abdul Baha speaks at great length and very emphatically against covenant breakers, and says that all of the American Baha'i community's problems stemmed from covenant breaking, namely Ibrahim Khairallah and Amin Farid. Then Abdul Baha says, it is of no importance. These violations cannot achieve any results. They cannot attract or hold any souls. They simply poison some souls and cause them to wither. But it is temporary. In a short time, you will see no trace left of them. Observe the life of Ibrahim Khairallah, how he was and how he is. They themselves and their damage to the cause are like the foam on the surface of the sea, ephemeral. I have adopted you as my own son. You have to appreciate this favor very much indeed. One should see that you are living according to the requirements of this sonship. You should be aware of your responsibilities. At present, take a new spirit to the German friends. To Mason Remy's ego-blinded vision, Abdul Baha's words are praise of his steadfastness, and he fails to see the caution laced inside the master's words. 21st of September, 1921, Haifa. The tablet to Dr. Auguste Forel. This is Dr. Forel working with insects. He was an entomologist, a specialist of insects. Now, who is Dr. Forel? I'll give you a short introduction. Auguste Henri Forel is a Swiss neuroanatomist, psychiatrist, and entomologist, distinguishing himself as a true pioneer in every field he took an interest in. Dr. Forel is known for his investigations of brain structure, and he is widely considered to be the co-founder of neuron theory. In 1889, Dr. Forel founded an institute at Zurich for the medical treatment of alcoholism and worked throughout his career to prevent the disease. When he retired, Dr. Forel dedicated the rest of his life to social reform and the study of the psychology of ants. Religion of social good. Dr. Forel's ideas about religion evolve over several stages until he publishes in December 1917 what he considers among his most important work, a book entitled Religion for Social Good, which he later elaborates into a new concept of religion he calls scientific religion as social good. His discovery of the Baha'i faith. In the winter months of 1920, 1921, Dr. Forel has his first encounter with the Baha'i faith when he spends some time at the home of his daughter Martha and her husband Arthur Browns, who is a Baha'i. His letter of 28 December 1920. Dr. Forel opens his letter to Abdul Baha by asking Abdul Baha if indeed he wrote wonderful letters to Wilhelm Herigel, asserting that if they do date from 1910, he is, quote, I am quite astonished at the prophetic clarity of your vision. Dr. Forel then launches into a long letter, essentially about belief systems, where he clearly lays out all the tenets of the Baha'i faith which deviate from his own beliefs, such as issues concerning materialist philosophers, consciousness, willpower, whether his agnosticism is compatible with being a Baha'i, and other deviations that aren't, the Baha'i faith doesn't quite align with his own religion for social good, scientific invention of religion, kind of. One of the most weighty tablets ever written by Abdul Baha. You notice that this is a qualification by Shoghi Effendi on 2 tablets written in the last 2 years of Abdul Baha's life. Dr. Forel only receives Abdul Baha's long and interesting tablet in March 1922, 3 months after Abdul Baha has passed away. It is enclosed with a very kind and very thoughtful letter from Shoghi Effendi, dated February 27th, 1922. In that letter, Shoghi Effendi tells Forel, the Baha'is the world over will be delighted to have copies of Abdul Baha's answer to your letter circulated among them, as it is unique in many respects and much appreciated in its nature and comprehensiveness. Shoghi Effendi will later refer to the tablet to Dr. Auguste Forel as one of the most weighty the master ever wrote in God Passes By. The tablet of Abdul Baha to Dr. Auguste Forel. Abdul Baha responds to Dr. Forel's 2-page letter with a nearly 4,000-word tablet in Persian, which he reveals on September 21st, 1921, just 2 months before his passing. In this tablet, Abdul Baha praises Forel as a revered personage, lover of truth. Abdul Baha also delineates in detail the various kingdoms, mineral, vegetable, animal, and the reality of man, and touches upon electrical energy and schools of philosophy. But Abdul Baha truly shines in his explanation of the relationship between the mental faculties and the soul, drawing a powerful parallel between the rays of the sun and the sun. Abdul Baha explains to Forel that even though the mind loses its capacity to reason, the power of the soul continues to exist. It's good of us to remember this. And most importantly, Abdul Baha elaborates at very great length and to a profound degree on the question of divinity, something Forel had been quite disillusioned about and discouraged about throughout his life, never finding a satisfactory answer to the question of divinity. The entire tablet of Abdul Baha to Dr. Forel is a work of perfection, so profound and so knowledgeable in its argumentation. It is perhaps the crowning achievement of Abdul Baha's tablet writing life, and a magnificently written sample of the emanations of his brilliant mind that could encompass any science. At the end of his life, Abdul Baha has written, at this point, when he writes this tablet to Dr. Forel, Abdul Baha has written 30,000 tablets, and this is one of his last. His total mastery of scientific and spiritual discourse shines resplendent in this unparalleled tablet. To his credit, Dr. Forel never waited for a reply from Abdul Baha. He decided on his own that the Baha'i faith was not, after all, in conflict with his own beliefs, and he began to identify himself openly and enthusiastically as a Baha'i, amending his will in August 1921 with this sentence: while Abdul Baha was still alive, this is the real religion of social welfare, not his invention, without dogmas or priests, binding together men, all men of this small terrestrial globe of ours. I have become a Baha'i. May this religion live and prosper for the good of humanity. This is my most ardent desire. From the time Dr. Forel embraces the Baha'i faith, he proclaims the faith to many in private addresses or in public talks. His daughter, married to a Baha'i, also becomes a Baha'i, and the faith becomes known in scientific circles where Dr. Forel is highly respected. He gives regular Sunday talks about Baha'u'llah's message in his beautiful 9-sided gazebo overlooking the Lake of Geneva. Perhaps Dr. Forel's most profound testament to the faith he so loved is one Shoghi Effendi quotes in God Passes By. The Baha'i movement is for the oneness of mankind, is in my estimation, the greatest movement today working for universal peace and brotherhood. Dr. Forel taught the faith until his dying breath. The last night of his life in 1931, he was teaching his gardeners about the Baha'i faith. September to November 1921 in Haifa, Abdul Baha brings electricity to the holy places. In honor of this story, I have chosen 2 illuminated 9-time photographs, the Shrine of the Bab and the Shrine of Baha'u'llah. In September, and Mom, this is your favorite story. You'll see why. In September 1921, Curtis Kelsey arrives in the Holy Land to install 3 electrical generators, which Roy Wilhelm had offered to Abdul Baha. During the last 2 months of Abdul Baha's life, he who so loved light, Curtis Kelsey, will work tirelessly to bring electrical light to the Shrine of the Bab, the Shrine of Baha'u'llah, and the houses of the Master, installing 1 generator in each location. Although his work is only completed in March 1922, 3 months after Abdul Baha's passing. When Curtis Kelsey is not working in Haifa near the Master, and he's working in Bahji on the Shrine of Baha'u'llah, not electrifying it, he finds any excuse he can to come to Haifa where Abdul Baha is and where he can see him. When he is working at the Shrine of the Bab, each day, Curtis Kelsey has lunch with Abdul Baha and Fujita. All 3 deeply cherish their lunch times together and even develop the most adorable routine. Every day, Curtis and Fujita hide Fujita's brown cat in the kitchen before Abdul Baha arrives. And every single day that Abdul Baha arrives, he says, "Let the cat out." As soon as Fujita releases the cat from the kitchen, the little animal races to Abdul Baha to be stroked and fed. Curtis is amazed that Abdul Baha enjoys their little ritual as much as he and Fujita and the cat do. One of Abdul Baha's daughters during this time asks Abdul Baha why he always eats lunch at the pilgrim house instead of at home where he could rest. Abdul Baha's response is the personification of Abdul Baha. He tells his daughter, "I like to eat with my friends." It is infinitely comforting to think of Abdul Baha having such joyful moments during these last few months of his extraordinary life. After the 13th of November, 1921, Haifa, Abdul Baha's vision for the Baha'i World Center. This is a panorama of Haifa and Akka at night from the Baha'i Gardens, and you can clearly see the illumination goes all around the crescent-shaped bay. This is the subject of this story. John and Louise Bosch arrive on November 13th, 1921, and are among the very last pilgrims that will ever come to the Holy Land during the ministry of Abdul-Bahá. They will also be present during Abdul-Bahā's ascension. One day during their pilgrimage, they're standing at the top of Mount Carmel, looking at the magnificent view before them. The perfect crescent arc of the Mediterranean Sea between Haifa and Akka. And Abdul-Bahá gives them a great gift. Less than 2 weeks before his passing, Louise Bosch records the master's vision that will become the Baha'i World Center in the distant future. Abdul-Bahā's vision is magnificently detailed, and interestingly includes several references to electricity, which Abdul-Bahá has himself agreed to begin installing in the holy places. One of his last great acts will be to take practical steps in making this grand vision a reality. Here is Abdul-Bahā's vision, shared with John and Louise Bosch on November 13th, 1920. In the future, the great distance between Haifa and Akka will be built up, and the two cities will join and clasp hands, becoming two terminal sections of one mighty metropolis. As I now look over this scene, I see so clearly that it will become one of the first emporiums of the world. This great semicircular bay will be transformed into the finest harbor, wherein ships from all nations will seek shelter and refuge. The great vessels of all the people will come to this port, bringing on their decks thousands and thousands of men and women from every part of the globe. The mountains and the plains will be dotted with the most modern buildings and palaces. Industries will be established and various institutions of a philanthropic nature will be founded. The flowers of civilization and culture from all nations will be brought here to blend their fragrances together and blaze the way for the brotherhood of man. Wonderful gardens, orchards, groves, and parks will be laid out on all sides. At night, the great city will be lighted by electricity. The entire harbor from Akka to Haifa will be one path of illumination. Powerful searchlights will be placed on both sides of Mount Carmel to guide the steamers, and Mount Carmel itself, from top to bottom, will be submerged in a sea of lights. There are two concluding elements to this, our last part before the ascension of Abdul-Bahá, which we will look at tomorrow. One is about Baha'i pilgrimage, and one is about worldwide missions for Abdul-Bahá, missions he sent eminent believers on during his lifetime. First, Baha'i pilgrimage. This was pilgrimage in the time of Baha'u'llah. It was pilgrimage to the presence of the Blessed Beauty. People came to the prison, the most great prison. People came to the house of Udi Khamar and the house of Abud. People came to Mazre. People came to Rizvan. People came to the mansion of Bahji. It was a living pilgrimage, therefore it moved wherever Baha'u'llah was. Pilgrimage during the ministry of Abdul-Bahá was a pilgrimage now to shrines, the shrine of Baha'u'llah in Bahji and the shrine of the Bab without its golden dome superstructure in Haifa. Baha'i pilgrims from the east had been making the long journey to meet Baha'u'llah since the days of Baghdad, basically, and then Edirne, and then Istanbul, and then Akka, and then wherever in Akka Baha'u'llah was. After Baha'u'llah's passing, pilgrims continued to make the arduous trek from Iraq, Persia, and India to gain spiritual guidance from his eldest son, the center of the covenant, Abdul Baha. Starting in 1892, all the way until his passing in 1891. Pilgrims at first had only one shrine to visit, the shrine of Baha'u'llah in Bahji, in the countryside of Akka, where Baha'u'llah's earthly remains were interred. But beginning in 1909, they also had the bounty of prostrating themselves at the shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel in Haifa. Eastern pilgrims. On the left is a photograph of Abdul Baha at the shrine of the Bab with Eastern pilgrims, and on the right is a photograph of the Eastern Pilgrim House. In the time of Abdul Baha, due to the inherent difference in language, culture, and place of origin, Eastern and Western pilgrims experienced the profound spiritual journey that is Baha'i pilgrimage in two culturally different ways. Eastern pilgrims from Iran, India, Burma, Russia, Iraq, and Afghanistan were housed in the Eastern Pilgrim House and with a member of the resident Baha'i community and the Holy Family. And their pilgrimage with Abdul Baha was conducted in Persian or Arabic with translations into Russian or other languages as needed. The guidance Abdul Baha imparted to them was aimed at continuing to empower the oldest, most advanced, most developed, most mature Baha'i community in the world, as well as the community having experienced decades of virtually continuous and unspeakably violent persecution. Abdul Baha could also speak to Eastern pilgrims about questions relating to Islam, the religion that was omnipresent where they lived. From 1868 to 1921, among the vast numbers of Eastern pilgrims flowing to the Holy Land would be illustrious Babis, relatives of martyrs, hands of the cause, future apostles of Baha'u'llah and their families. Abdul Baha often spoke in great detail on the history of the faith, and between 1914 and 1915, he gave table talks in Persian about 69 illustrious early believers, which were eventually published as Memorials of the Faithful. Western pilgrims. On the left, Western pilgrims in front of the shrine of the Bab. In November 1919, some of the people that are identified in this photograph are Harry Randall, Bahir Randall, later Winkler, Ruth Randall, John S. Lamont, Albert Vale, George Latimer, Lutfullah Hakim, future member of the Universal House of Justice. And on the right is three pilgrims on the steps of the Western Pilgrim House. At first, Western pilgrims found accommodations in a hotel around Akka and Haifa, and later they would stay in what is called the Western Pilgrim House across the street from the House of the Master. The very first 15 pilgrims that were of Western descent arrived in Akka in the winter of 1898, and they were all European or American, almost all of Christian background, one or two of Jewish background. The guidance Abdul Baha bestowed on them would have been translated by interpreters into English. And some of these early believers made the effort, as soon as they became Baha'is, to learn Persian in order to communicate directly with Abdul Baha. Western pilgrims were new to the faith, unlike Eastern pilgrims who were probably several generations Baha'i from Babi ancestors. And so Abdul Baha imparted to them different things. Instead of focusing on the history of the faith, Abdul Baha would impart to them the clear principles of the faith of Baha'u'llah, such as the 84 table talks on 5 main subjects collected between 1904 and 1906 by Laura Clifford Barney and later published under the title Some Answered Questions. Another lesser-known publication is available on the website for the Universal House of Justice. It is called 12 Table Talks Given by Abdul Baha in Akka, a compilation of talks given between 1904 and 1907. In collaboration with Earl Redmond, the author of Abdul Baha in Their Midst, The Travels of Abdul Baha in the West, and 2 books on visiting pilgrims to Abdul Baha between 1898 and 1921, you can download this PDF that we created together. Let me just read what this says. There are records of about 700 pilgrims between the years 1894 and 1921, of which 250 were Western pilgrims. Approximately 250 between 1894 and 1921, and 360 pilgrims between 1897 and 1912. And 315 pilgrims between 1913 and 1921. So to download a PDF of all the pilgrims identified by Earl Redman in volumes 1 and 2 of his book, you can download this PDF and you'll have a list of all the pilgrims that he was able to identify between 1913 and 1925. But one of the things is that a large number of pilgrims were never recorded. So this is it's a low estimate. Here are some of these extraordinary pilgrims. They appear in almost chronological order, and you can see Hands of the Cause, Disciples of Abdul Baha, Apostles of Baha'u'llah. Some are both, like John Eslamont. He was a disciple of Abdul Baha and a Hand of the Cause. And then Seiichiro Fujita is among them, Ella Cooper, Helen Goodall, John Bosch, Louise Bosch, Curtis Kelsey, who came to install electricity, and then German believers, Grace Krug and Florian Krug. Now, the last part of this conclusion to part 8 is the worldwide missions of Abdul Baha. This is a map that numbers up to marker 23. All of the worldwide missions we were able to find that Abdul Baha specifically sent believers on. So this map is sort of a jointure between the lives of Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi because of their shared love of maps and Shoghi Effendi's future maps of the 10-year crusade. These are missions that Abdul Baha sent individuals on around the world. Some were sent with confidential, secret, or critical missions. Some were asked to undertake teaching trips. Some were asked to deepen believers on certain subjects. Others were asked with specific missions of social action, and yet others were sent on missions to protect the covenant. In 1900 in America, and again in 1914 in England. The map here attempts to show 23 of these missions, clearly identified by markers and described in detail below. You can see here the map references and read about the different missions that Abdul Baha sent people on. I'm just going to pick a few of my favorites. Map marker 2 is Mirza Abul Fazl, later appointed Apostle of Baha'u'llah, was sent by Abdul Baha to Paris in the United States between 1900 and 1904 to deepen everybody on the covenant at the time when Khairullah was very active. Map marker 3, Abdul Baha sent Haji Mirza Muhammad Taqi Vakilud Daole, a cousin of the Bab, later an apostle of Baha'u'llah, to supervise the building of the first Baha'i house of worship. Map marker 4, the master asked Lua Getzinger, who would be called Herald of the Covenant and later appointed disciple of Abdul Baha, and Hippolyte Dreyfus, also later appointed a disciple of Abdul Baha, to write and present a petition to the Shah of Persia when he was in Paris. Map marker 8, we covered in part 6. This was when Abdul Baha tasked Kareem True with working on the building of the house of worship in Wilmette. Map marker 9 is Susan Moody, who Abdul Baha sent to minister to the women in Iran. Map marker 10 is Abdul Baha instructing Joseph Hannon to teach the faith to African Americans in Washington, D.C. Map marker 13, Japan, Agnes Alexander, pioneer to Japan in 1914 at the request of Abdul Baha. Map marker 19. If you look in South America, you'll see Martha Root here. She had written about her desire to travel the world to teach the faith, and Abdul Baha had encouraged her. He said, "My hope from the blessings of His Holiness Baha'u'llah is that thou mayest forget rest and composure, and like unto a swift flying bird, thou mayest reproduce the melodies of the kingdom and engage in songs and music in the best of tunes." So poetic. Map marker 20, Hyde and Clara Dunn, later both appointed hands of the cause, traveled to Australia. Map marker 20. Map marker 21, Fanny Knobloch traveled from Washington to Cape Town, South Africa in July, August 1920, where she stayed for a year to establish the faith in that country. 22, Leonora Holsapple was the first Baha'i to live in Brazil. And map marker 23, Ursula Rexford set out for Alaska in 1922 in direct response to Abdul Baha's tablets of the divine plan. And this is a map of the progress of the 10-year crusade from 1953 to 1958, based on the tablets of the divine plan of Abdul Baha and created by hand by Shoghi Effendi himself. And lastly, you can go to part 8 of the chronology at the end, and you can read the biographies of some of the people who were honored with meeting Abdul Baha in the Holy Land. Dear friends, we will see each other tomorrow for the final part, where we will talk about the months, weeks, and days leading up to the ascension of Abdul Baha. This is always a very difficult thing for me to do. I'm fine with all the other parts. It's just always very difficult for me to handle the ascensions. They take me twice as long as any other part to write, and I find them very difficult to tell stories about. Because I don't know if you feel the same way I do, but I feel like I've been in the presence of Abdul Baha for 12 days. I feel like I've been with him everywhere, and the idea that he stops moving is too much for me sometimes. But I want to thank you all, and I want to especially thank Peter Terry for having had the idea of these narrated chronologies. My voice doesn't thank him, but my soul does. And I want to thank From Foundation Academy for the honor of doing this. And thank you so much for Clearwater Baha'is. They're always there, always support us. They're always there to not let us get lost in the technicalities of Zoom. This only works because of Jeremiah's sacrifice. It's the only way this works. And I want to thank Chad Jones and everything that he's doing at Desert Rose Baha'i Institute. All these amazing classes, all of the work he does year after year and decade after decade to plunge us into the dawn breakers with these storytellings that he does. It is an immense amount of work and energy, and he is just a champion. And I want to thank you all for always being here. If I was in front of a mic, I would never do this. I could only do this because you're here. So you are all a part of this. So now we're going to leave the recording on for the questions. For any questions and comments that you have, please give me a chance to drink. You can talk.
Everyone should be able to unmute themselves now.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
I wanted to say something about the 2 tablets of the Hague. I mean, when you read that part of Abdul Baha saying that he has planted the seed and puts his trust in God. Sometimes, even today in the world of teaching the faith, we can easily get so discouraged. And hearing that made my heart and my soul really feel comforted in the efforts of promulgating the faith. Yeah.
I want to address this. I'm sorry, we have a little bit of time because I finished a little early today. I want to read you something that speaks exactly to what Kyoko just said. This is one of the most important aspects of our faith, especially all of you who are living in isolated communities. I want to read you this. This is the story of a Baha'i who didn't accomplish what she set to accomplish. And this is an encouragement to me every single day that I am alive. It's an entry in the diary of Keith Ransom Keller. She had failed to win more freedoms for the Baha'is in Iran. And then she penned these immortal words about suffering and failing and not failing. And I want to read them to you before I take the next question. Hand of the Cause, Keith Ransom Keller, shortly before dying in Iran, wrote this about what we may think is failure. I want you to listen. And I'm going to put it in the chat so you can follow along if you want. I hope it's not too long for the chat. Oh, it's too long. Okay, hold on. Let me just paste it in one paragraph at a time. And don't worry, everybody on YouTube, I'm going to read it. Okay, so sometimes it's easier to really have it penetrate if you can follow along. Keith Ransom Keller wrote, and she was elevated to the rank of martyr by Shoghi Effendi. I have fallen, though I never faltered. Months of effort with nothing accomplished is the record that confronts me. If anyone in the future should be interested in this thwarted adventure of mine, he alone can say, whether near or far from the seemingly impregnable heights of complaisance and indifference, my tired old body fell. The smoke and din of battle are today too dense for me to ascertain whether I moved forward or I was slain in my tracks. Nothing in the world is meaningless, suffering least of all. Sacrifice with its attendant agony is a germ, an organism. Abdul Baha called it a seed. Man cannot blight its fruition as he can the seeds of the earth. Once sown, it blooms, I think forever, in the sweet fields of eternity. Mine will be a very modest flower, perhaps like the single tiny forget-me-not, watered by the blood of Quddus that I plucked in the Sabzi Maidfi of Barfurushi. Should it ever catch the eye, may one who seems to be struggling in vain garner it in the name of Shoghi Effendi and cherish it for his dear remembrance. Quote, while the tower raves, vainly breaking seam, here no painful inch to gain, far back through creeks and inlets making, silent comes flooding in the rain. The thing about suffering that Abdul Baha was trying to teach us with his life and with his journeys to the West was that everything we do is planting seeds. We have no idea where they're going to bloom, what shape they're going to take, but all we need to remember is the spiritual seeds. They are planted whether you want it or not, whether you were conscious or not, whether you're aware of it or not. They're planted and they can never be smushed out. They can never be dug up because these spiritual seeds of your suffering, your life as an isolated believer, you're maybe a pioneer who can get back to their post. You may be having a crisis of faith. All of those things are possible. But if you're experiencing suffering, a seed is blooming and no one can rip the roots out of that seed. Terry, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to comment about, I guess, the fact that Abdul-Bahá visited Germany prior to World War I and World War II, And I'm looking at what's happening in the United States now, how similar it is to what happened in Germany back in the 1930s. I just want to emphasize that what we have been given as Baha'is, as the covenant, that we need to rely on what Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, Shoghi Effendi had sacrificed to teach us. And but like I said, that's just a comment and observation.
I think it's brilliant.
Right.
I think it's brilliant. Yeah, Abdul Baha blessed Germany with his footsteps twice, and Germany would be like the central theater for 2 world wars. That's an excellent point.
Well, also another comment I want to make is, okay, the Baha'is in Iran are suffering the ways that the early Christians suffered in ancient Rome. And I look at what's going on in the world today as, what's happening in the Roman Empire and the United States. To me, it's like, ancient Rome. And it seems to me that there's going to be probably the transformation of the United States and the United Nations into a world government. And it's just something that I don't know if I'll be alive to see that, but I guess we're planting the seeds for, I guess, the lesser peace to blossom to the most great peace.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I think the attitude of like thinking of what we're doing and what we're suffering as seeds that can't be blighted, I think that can give us courage to be together, and give us courage to not lose courage. It's important.
Violetta,
Yes.
I would like to share that every morning at 8 o'clock Arizona time, there's a group here that has a devotional meeting on Zoom. And every day we end with a prayer for America.
Oh,
and
wow.
I encourage everyone to read it because it's probably one of the things that really gives me the most hope. Because when Abdul-Bahá talks about God confirming this American nation and a revered nation and how glorious our future will be, it has to give us hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I can, I'll try to put in the chat that so that anyone who would like to join is welcome too.
Thank you. That's very generous of you. I can see that you're having these meetings daily, and we just read a story about Abdul Baha visiting Adasiyyih, remember? And he told the people there, you have to have daily meetings. I think that one of the reasons why he encouraged that, and we can do this on Zoom now, like we've been seeing each other daily for 12 days now. And I think that one of the reasons is that we are all, I have 2 theories about Baha'is. One is we are all isolated believers, even if we're in large communities, because we're not constantly with the community, And I think the other thing that I have about Baha'is is something I truly believe in, is that no matter if you're a 9th generation Baha'i or you declared 2 weeks ago, I think we're all 1st generations Baha'is because we've never lived this life before. Our path to steadfastness and towards Baha'u'llah is the first time we're walking this path. So it really doesn't matter if you're 9th generation or you declared 2 weeks ago, because what does that mean? How many generations, like we need to recreate our bond with Baha'u'llah every single day we wake up. And there are times in our life when we feel farther away. And so I think these daily meetings are exactly what Abdul Baha wanted, And the prayer for America is revealed by Abdul Baha. So he's like, you're making him happy, and if you're taking care of children, if you're saying prayers, you're making him happy. Beautiful prayer.
Violetta,
Yes.
I brought you flowers. These are from our convention and they were so beautiful. I knew you would absolutely
Oh
love
God, I love them.
Aren't they great?
I just got to take a picture of this. I took a picture of the screen. I can frame it.
So these are for you.
Let me take a picture. Hold on. Right. Stephanie got flowers. Oh, my mom for my birthday a few months ago. Yes, thank you, Mommy. Thank you, Lucinda. That was so nice.
From all of us here.
Oh my God, they're beautiful. This is my favorite color combination: white, purple, and yellow. Love it. Oh, that's gorgeous. I don't know what to say.
We love you and we really appreciate you doing this. You have no idea what you bring to our homes every day.
Not ever in a million years. Wow, that's the best thing that's happened to me on Zoom ever. Oh my God. Luckily my makeup is waterproof. Oh,
Well, I waited to the end.
yeah, that's what. You know what? I finally get it. You know that really famous story? I couldn't remember where it was. I should have put it in the chronology, but in America, I think it was in Washington, D.C., Abdul Baha picked this huge bouquet and gave it to a banker who was running in the hallway. Remember that story? I don't know if you remember that story. So he was in Chicago, and there was a banker who was like really busy, running, like probably looking at the floor. And then Abdul Baha just like picked this immense bouquet of roses out of the hotel lobby, not even his own roses, just gave them to the guy. Who would have just been like, what? I was running to a meeting and now I have like 50 roses.
Come back to your heart.
Huh?
Want to say something?
Come back to your heart.
Oh yeah, exactly.
When you're ready, just talk.
That's exactly how it felt. I was like, there was always an element of that story that I was missing. And now I realize what it was. It was that that sort of that blossoming in your heart, that flowers can cause. They're so beautiful, especially a bouquet, Oh man, that's amazing.
I have a piece of information to pass on.
Sorry?
I have a piece of information I'd like to share.
Please do.
Yes. What? Oh, my wife says to tell you, I'm supposed to tell everybody that I'm Dean. So, all right, I'm Dean. However,
I know you, Dean and Judy.
So, well, I'm usually kind of off in the fringes, but I don't know if everybody knows, but along with everything else Violetta does, she's put together a couple of compilations that are available online on the BahaiLibrary.org site. One is on the Holy Spirit, and one is on what's the Sidratul Muntaha and how it's portrayed in different dispensations of the past. I haven't delved very much into them, in fact, barely have, but so I think people might want to know about those and go grab them.
Wow, nice. That's so kind of you. It's really funny. I did those during COVID when I was isolated in COVID. I did like 4 or 5 really big compilations, and they were just published yesterday by Baha'i Library Online. I'll look for the links and I'll give them to you just now. I have it somewhere.
The other ones, I only saw the first 2.
I have. I think there's 5. I'll just give it to you right now.
Okay.
You know what I think I might do is I might just put it in the email that you get every day from me. How's
That'd
that?
be
I'm not doing any research now. And I'll include the quote because I already have someone ask me for that quote. I'll include the quote and the references to that quote, and I'll include those. There's one on self and selflessness, one on personal teaching, one on the Holy Spirit, one on, there's 4, I think. That's really nice of you to mention, Dean. I'm so touched.
Thank you, Dean. For us.
I also, if you're interested, I also have illustrated the whole book 1. All the quotes from book 1 are all illustrated. So if you want to pass them as a slideshow when you're doing book 1 and want to have like cute quotes, or if you want to send them out to your participants, I have.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
I think I have book 1 and book 2. I'm not sure if I have book 3.
Thank you.
But yeah, I can send that to you. I'll send that to you as well.
Oh, I love book 1 and book 2. They're my.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll send you another thing that I have is a poster of virtues. I have 101 virtues on there, and you can just put up the poster, and then the kids can talk about the virtues, or it's like an icebreaker for adults. Or
Great.
yeah,
That-
I really like that we're talking about these compilations and teaching aids at the conclusion of Abdul-Bahā's life, because I think that he's sort of like guiding this conversation. You know, we're not too sad. We're not thinking about tomorrow. We're just like, we're thinking about teaching and sacrifice and being, you know, sometimes alone. And we're thinking about, you know, art and flowers. And I think it's really nice.
Well, when
I
we're,
didn't expect this to be the conversation at the end of today. And I'm really, really happy it is.
when we're sharing book 1 and book 2, any of the books, having these stories in our selves. So when something is read and it sparks one of these stories, it's so rich. I mean, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I agree with you. I completely agree with you.
These stories enrich everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Violetta,
They came out of my own desire to have illustrations for Baha'i history. That's how I remember now, you know?
Yeah.
Like I would read books and I wouldn't remember, but now that I have all these pictures and these photographs, it makes it really real and I can remember now.
There you
Yes,
go.
Jim.
Yeah.
I'm really new at Zoom. Can you see if that post came through on the chat?
Okay, let me look. I don't think it did. What do you want to send it to me by email? And I'll include it to my email. What about you do that? You send it to me on email and I'll share it with everyone today.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
And it's
that'd
very
be
interesting
great.
because every email I've sent at the end of the day so far has just been the link to the story. But then we arrive at the end of Abdul-Bahā's life. And I think we've all been so touched and stimulated by the wealth of his life that now we have all these ideas. You have teaching things, we have this, we have Jim's meeting, we have all kinds of things. And, you know, it's important that we stay in touch, you know, like the never feel like at the end of this, like you just keep the connection, you know, and don't forget that you'll be the first people I email sometime in March or April when I'm ready to tell the stories about Shoghi Effendi. You won't be my
Violetta,
yes.
I used to be on your email, but
my God, Diana, you used to be. What does that mean?
I'm not getting your email anymore.
Let me fix that right now.
I put my email in the chat.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you haven't missed anything because they were just but today is great that you said something because I am actually have a little place I put this to never. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. Thank you for saying something, Diana. You'll definitely get an email from me today. I'm so happy you spoke up.
Violetta, this is Judy. Also,
hi, Judy.
Mine
okay.
Not getting the emails daily.
Okay,
either.
all right. Okay. Let's do that right now. Anybody not getting the emails, just put your email in the chat. I'm just copying and pasting onto my notepad here. Diana, okay, got that. Yes, Peter Terry left me a private message and said, yes, I did a lot of things for COVID for teaching the faith. I even have some random things, you know, kind of like I have a really nice PowerPoint presentation for the martyrdom of the Bab, you know, in English. So with all pictures, including really rare pictures of the inside of the cell and things like that. Okay. Wow, I didn't realize I missed so many people. So I'll just include all of these things.
Are all of these are on our utteranceproject.com?
No, none of them are. No, I didn't have a place for them. That is why Dean mentioned it today, because I wrote to the man who runs Baha'i Library Online, and I said, I have a lot of material that might be useful to people if they're trying to, like, you know, there's some that are like Christian subjects and Ruhi materials. And so he said, okay, fine, we'll do them a little at a time. And so he published the first 4 today, and then I'll put them up also later, but you'll get a first
Wonderful.
Yeah, Judy. Okay, got you, Judy. I wonder if Dean gets my emails because I seem to remember seeing his email. I don't know if he gets it. Yeah,
Dean does. get
Yeah,
it.
okay, all right. Got you. Yeah, I think that Baha'i history and biography has this power, I think, where it makes you think of something. So like you plunge into the biography together with people, and then you're talking, and then it gives you ideas for how you can teach and how you can be more effective and how you can apply, even if it's like one atom of this to your life. But then actually, when you're actually teaching, then you're going to go back to Baha'i history, exactly like Lucinda was saying. You're going to be doing a children's class or like a junior youth class, and you'll tell the junior youth about disappointment, and you'll explain to them, Shoghi Effendi was turned back. Imagine how heartbreaking that must have been for him, or you'll be teaching, you'll be doing a course with women, and you'll bring up stories from the greatest holy leaf or Munir Khanum, and so I think it's like a seesaw kind of like we have a really neat French expression called vase communicant, which is like, imagine you have like two glasses and there's like a communication between the two glasses. So like if one empties, you can add more water and it goes into the other one. So it's really neat. And I think that Baha'i history and teaching is like, they go like this, like Baha'i history gets us to teach. That's the point. It gets us to have courage. And then while we're teaching, we bring up Baha'i history. And then that's how you just plant all these seeds, you make connections with history. If history wasn't important, Abdul Baha wouldn't have spent tired evenings when he was 72 telling stories about memorials of the faithful, 69 biographies. If history wasn't important, Shoghi Effendi wouldn't have written 2 history books, Dawnbreakers and God Passes By, And Abdul Baha actually wrote 2 history books too. He wrote the Traveler's Narrative and Memorials of the Faithful. So if history wasn't important, Baha'u'llah wouldn't have mentioned history of the past or history of past religions in so many of his tablets. The idea that history is like this dusty, boring discipline is not, we don't think it is. We're having fun with history. We're interacting with it, we're understanding it, we're getting ideas from it. And I think that's what Baha'i history is meant to do. It's like a movement. Yep. Harry just said history is usually written by the victors of war. I have a presentation that I did first. That was one of the first talks I gave for Clearwater. That's about how Baha'i history can be transformative and why it's different than secular history, because it has to do with the covenant. See, the reason that we feel so inspired today, we're so inspired today, is because we've just been talking about the center of the covenant, And yes, Terry, history, secular history, is written by the victors. And the difference with Baha'i history is that it's written by the persecuted.
Well, there's just one brief thing I want to mention is that here in the United States, there was something called the 1619 Project that has created a lot of umbrage from individuals who suffer from, I guess, what some people call white fragility. And it's just like, you see, I'm from Alabama, and it's just like I'm in the center of the hurricane, so to speak, of people who want to deny history of the United States. I mean, the history of the United States is rather notorious concerning how the treatment of Native Americans were since the 1600s, and basically we're living on stolen land.
Yes.
Stolen land from the natives, and it's just like, unfortunately, well, the thing is, part of my experience is that I was the only Caucasian member of the Black History Month committee at university in Birmingham. And it's just, when I joined, people looked at me as suspicious, just like, okay, am I a spy or am I a plant? And it's just like, no, it's just like when I became a Baha'i, I was reading about how Abdul Baha, talked to W.E.B. Du Bois and all that. And it's just like, that, such history is extremely important. And, here I am, back in the 1980s, and, race relations were at a not very friendly ebb. But, getting back to my original point, there was a group called the Daughters of the Confederacy who rewrote the history of the Civil War, where they literally whitewashed it to make it
Okay.
look like the so-called lost cause. But
Mm.
but that's getting to the point where I was talking about history of the victors,
Yeah.
and what they did, even in spite of the fact they lost the war, they were able to rewrite history such that we had the civil rights thing happen, from, the end of slavery to, the 1960s. And, that's basically it. Excuse me for a second.
Yep. Yep. And that's why Baha'i history, because it's freed from that, is completely transformative. So friends, I have a Ruhi book in 2 minutes. I have to go. I will see you tomorrow. Thanks again to everyone at Firm Foundation, Desert Rose, and the Clearwater Friends. And thank you especially all for coming. Bye, Joe. Bye, Lucinda. Bye, Joy,
Thank you
Jim,
so much.
everyone. Take
Take
care.
care.
Thank you so much
Bye-bye.
for being here.